Pregnant woman delivers twins, one human, one alien. How is this even possible? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Rachel Bennett lived an ordinary life in a quiet suburban neighborhood. She was 30 years old, married to her high school sweetheart, Ethan, and the couple was eagerly awaiting the arrival of their first child. The nursery was already painted a soft pastel blue, a crib set up in the corner, and shelves filled with baby books and stuffed animals. Rachel's life seemed picture-perfect, or so it appeared from the outside. But Rachel had a secret she hadn't even shared with Ethan. Over the past few months, strange, unexplainable things had been happening. It all started during her second trimester when she began having vivid, almost lifelike dreams. In these dreams, she was surrounded by glowing lights, weightless in a sea of stars. She would wake up in the middle of the night, her skin tingling and her heart racing. At first, she brushed it off as normal pregnancy hormones, but the dreams became more intense and frequent. One morning, Rachel woke up to find small, triangular marks on her abdomen. They were faint but unmistakable, arranged in a pattern that looked deliberate, almost as if someone, or something, had placed them there. She showed Ethan, but he laughed it off, joking that it was probably the result of her tossing and turning in bed. Rachel smiled, pretending to agree, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her prenatal checkups were also unusual. Her doctor, Dr. Myers, had been monitoring her closely since the beginning of her pregnancy, but during her 20-week ultrasound, he noticed something strange. "You're carrying twins," he said, his brow furrowed as he examined the screen. "But there's something odd about the second one." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean odd?" Dr. Myers hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's nothing to worry about right now," he said finally. "But one of the twins seems to have an unusual anatomy. It could just be the angle of the ultrasound, but we'll need to keep an eye on it." Rachel nodded, trying to stay calm, but the doctor's words echoed in her mind. Over the next few weeks, she began to notice other strange symptoms. Her cravings, which had started out normal, pickles, ice cream, the usual, took a bizarre turn. She found herself drawn to foods she had never liked before, like raw kale and seaweed. Even Ethan joked that her pregnancy cravings were out of this world. And then there was the baby's movement. Most mothers described feeling gentle flutters or kicks, but Rachel's experience was different. It felt like the second baby was shifting in ways that defied logic, almost as if it were moving in patterns. Sometimes, it felt like it was responding to her thoughts, its movements calming her when she was stressed or energizing her when she felt tired. Rachel tried to dismiss her concerns, focusing instead on preparing for the arrival of her babies. She spent her days organizing the nursery, attending childbirth classes, and reading parenting books. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that her pregnancy wasn't normal. One night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she decided to confide in Ethan. "Do you ever think about the possibility of life out there?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Ethan turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Life out where?" "You know," Rachel said, gesturing vaguely. "In the universe. Aliens." Ethan chuckled. "Is this about your weird pregnancy cravings? Because if so, I think you're giving the kale too much credit." Rachel forced a laugh, but her expression remained serious. "I'm not joking, Ethan. What if something about this pregnancy isn't what we think it is?" Ethan's smile faded, and he sat up, looking at her closely. "Rachel, what's going on? You've been acting strange for weeks." Rachel hesitated, debating whether to tell him about the dreams, the marks, the strange movements. But before she could decide, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen, making her gasp. "Rachel?" Ethan said, his voice panicked. "Are you okay?" She clutched her belly, breathing heavily. The pain subsided as quickly as it had come, leaving her shaken. I think it's just Braxton Hicks," she said, trying to sound calm. "False contractions. It's normal." But Ethan wasn't convinced. "We're going to the hospital," he said firmly, grabbing his phone to call their doctor. At the hospital, Rachel underwent a series of tests and ultrasounds. Dr. Myers reassured them that everything looked fine, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was being left unsaid. As she lay on the hospital bed, staring at the ultrasound screen, she thought she saw something, just for a moment, something that didn't look like a human baby. But before she could say anything, the image shifted, and Dr. Myers moved on. "Everything seems to be progressing normally," he said, his tone upbeat. "But I'll want to monitor you closely for the rest of your pregnancy, just to be safe." Rachel nodded, trying to appear reassured, but inside, her mind was racing. She knew what she had seen, or at least what she thought she had seen. And as much as she wanted to believe that everything was fine, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. Rachel's unease grew in the following weeks. She found herself hyper-aware of every sensation in her body, every movement from her babies. The second twin's movements were becoming more pronounced, more distinct from its siblings. It wasn't just the usual kicks or stretches. At times, it felt almost like a deliberate push or a ripple beneath her skin. It was unlike anything she'd read about in the pregnancy books stacked on her nightstand. Ethan tried to reassure her, but his own nervousness was hard to hide. He spent hours online, researching unusual pregnancies and poring over forums where expectant parents shared their experiences. But none of the stories came close to what Rachel was going through. "I think we should get a second opinion," Ethan said one evening as they sat in the living room. "Not that I don't trust Dr. Myers, but maybe a specialist could give us more clarity." Rachel hesitated. She appreciated Ethan's concern, but part of her was afraid of what a second opinion might reveal. What if it confirmed her worst fears? What if there was something truly unexplainable about her pregnancy? "I'll think about it," she said finally, offering him a weak smile. Ethan nodded, sensing her hesitation but not wanting to push her. "But just know I'm here, whatever you decide." As Rachel's due date approached, her dreams became more vivid. One night, she found herself floating in a vast, star-filled expanse. The air was cool and tinged with an electric energy that made her skin tingle. She wasn't alone. There were figures surrounding her, their forms blurred and indistinct, but their presence felt overwhelming. They seemed to be communicating, not with words but with emotions, sending waves of calm and reassurance directly into her mind. When Rachel woke up, her heart was racing. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her babies. The dreams felt too real to ignore, too specific to dismiss as simple imagination. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were connected to her pregnancy, that they were trying to tell her something. A few days later, during her weekly checkup, Dr. Myers performed another ultrasound. Rachel watched the screen closely, her heart pounding in her chest. The first twin appeared as expected, its tiny body curled up peacefully. But when the second twin came into view, Rachel's breath caught in her throat. There was clearer than ever. The shape was different, the proportions unusual. Where the first baby had a rounded head and delicate features, the second twin's head was elongated, its limbs thinner and more angular. It almost didn't look real. Dr. Myers stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered under his breath. Rachel's pulse quickened. "What is it? What's wrong?" Dr. Myers hesitated, clearly trying to choose his words carefully. "The second twin, its development is unlike anything I've encountered before." "It's unique?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. "What does that mean?" Dr. Myers sighed. "I wish I could give you a clear answer. Structurally, it appears healthy, but its anatomy doesn't match any known abnormalities or conditions. I think it would be wise to bring in a specialist." Rachel exchanged a glance with Ethan, her fear mirrored in his eyes. "Okay," she said quietly. "Let's do it." The following week, Rachel and Ethan met with Dr. Patel, a renowned specialist in high-risk pregnancies. Dr. Patel was calm and methodical, her years of experience evident in the way she explained each step of the examination. But as she reviewed Rachel's case, her normally composed demeanor faltered. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Patel said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and confusion. "I've never encountered anything like it." Rachel's heart sank. "Is my baby okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "As far as I can tell, both babies are healthy," Dr. Patel said. But the second twin's anatomy is unprecedented. It doesn't align with any known human variations. What does that mean? Ethan asked, his tone sharp. Dr. Patel hesitated. I'm not sure. I'd like to perform additional tests, but given how far along you are, I don't want to risk any complications. For now, I recommend close monitoring and planning for a highly controlled delivery. Rachel nodded, her mind racing. She felt like she was trapped in a surreal nightmare, each step taking her further away from the normal, happy pregnancy she had envisioned. As word of Rachel's unusual pregnancy spread, the media caught wind of the story. Reporters camped outside the hospital, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious mother-to-be. Rumors swirled, ranging from wild conspiracy theories to genuine concern for Rachel's well-being. The attention was overwhelming. Rachel stopped going out in public, relying on Ethan to run errands and handle day-to-day tasks. Even their neighbors began to whisper, their once friendly smiles replaced with wary glances. Rachel felt like a spectacle, her privacy stripped away by the growing fascination with her pregnancy. But amidst the chaos, Rachel found moments of solace. Late at night, when the world was quiet, she would sit in the nursery, her hands resting on her belly. She spoke softly to her babies, telling them stories and singing lullabies. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to protect them, no matter what. The night Rachel went into labor was one she would never forget. The contractions started suddenly, sharp and intense. Ethan rushed her to the hospital, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he tried to keep calm. When they arrived, the hospital was already buzzing with activity. Dr. Myers and Dr. Patel were waiting for them, their expressions serious but focused. Rachel was wheeled into a delivery room, the bright lights and sterile walls adding to her anxiety. You're going to be fine, Ethan said, squeezing her hand. I'm right here. Rachel nodded, her breathing labored. The contractions were coming faster now, each one sending a wave of pain through her body. She focused on Ethan's voice, his words grounding her as the doctors prepared for the delivery. The first twin was born quickly, a healthy baby boy with a strong cry that filled the room. Rachel's heart swelled with relief as she held him in her arms, tears streaming down her face. But the relief was short-lived. As the doctors turned their attention to the second twin, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The monitors beeped erratically, and the medical team exchanged tense glances. Rachel's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. What's happening? She asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel looked at her, her expression calm but serious. The second baby is coming. Stay strong, Rachel. Rachel nodded, her heart pounding. She felt a final, intense contraction, and then it happened. The second twin entered the world. The room fell silent. The baby didn't cry, but its large, luminous eyes blinked up at the doctors. Its skin was smooth and pale, almost translucent, and its head was elongated, with delicate, angular features that seemed otherworldly. Rachel stared in awe, her exhaustion forgotten. Is my baby okay? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Patel nodded slowly, cradling the newborn in her hands. Your baby is alive and healthy, she said. But this is extraordinary. Ethan leaned forward, his face pale as he looked at the alien-like infant. What does this mean? Dr. Patel met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I don't know, she admitted. But one thing is clear, your family's story is just beginning. The silence in the delivery room was deafening as everyone processed what had just happened. The human baby, nestled in Ethan's arms, let out soft cries, oblivious to the strange tension around him. Meanwhile, the alien-like baby in Dr. Patel's hands blinked slowly, its large, luminous eyes taking in the room. The contrast between the two newborns was surreal, two lives so intertwined yet so vastly different. Rachel's voice broke the silence. Can I hold them? She asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel hesitated for a moment before carefully placing the alien twin into Rachel's waiting arms. The baby was lighter than she had expected, its skin cool to the touch. It gazed up at her, and Rachel felt an overwhelming sense of connection, as if the baby could see straight into her soul. Ethan stood beside her, holding their human son. He looked down at the alien twin, his face a mix of confusion, awe, and fear. What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel didn't have an answer. She simply cradled both babies, one in each arm, and let the tears fall freely. Despite the strange circumstances, these were her children. She didn't care what they looked like or where they might have come from. She loved them both with every fiber of her being. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Doctors and nurses moved in and out of the room, performing tests and taking samples from both babies. The human twin, whom Rachel and Ethan named Noah, was declared perfectly healthy. The alien twin, however, was a mystery. Its vitals were stable, and it appeared to be breathing and functioning normally, but its anatomy was unlike anything the medical staff had ever seen. Dr. Patel approached Rachel and Ethan later that evening, her expression serious. "We need to send some of these findings to specialists," she said. "There's so much we don't understand about your second baby, and we'll need help figuring it out." Rachel clutched the alien twin closer to her chest. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice edged with panic. "Are you going to take my baby away?" "No," Dr. Patel said quickly. "That's not what I'm suggesting. But we need to bring in experts, people who can help us understand what's happening here. Your baby is stable and healthy, but we need to be prepared for any complications." Ethan nodded, though his jaw was tight. "We just want to make sure both our babies are safe." Dr. Patel offered a reassuring smile. "We'll do everything we can." Word of the extraordinary birth spread quickly. By the next morning, the hospital was swarmed with reporters, and the story was making headlines across the globe. News outlets speculated wildly, with some dubbing the alien twin the miracle baby and others raising concerns about its origins. Theories ranged from genetic mutations to extraterrestrial intervention, and the public couldn't get enough. Rachel and Ethan were overwhelmed by the attention. Hospital security had to be tightened to keep the press at bay, and the couple was advised to avoid any public statements. Inside their room, they tried to focus on their new family, but the weight of the situation was impossible to ignore. Rachel sat in the rocking chair, cradling the alien twin, whom they had tentatively named Leo. She watched him intently, marveling at his delicate features and the way his luminous eyes seemed to absorb everything around him. He was quiet but alert, his gaze following her every movement. It was almost as if he understood her. Noah, meanwhile, was a typical newborn, crying loudly, squirming in Ethan's arms, and demanding constant attention. The stark contrast between the two babies was both fascinating and unsettling. "Do you think he's from somewhere else?" Ethan asked one evening, his voice hesitant. Rachel looked up at him, her brow furrowed. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't care where he's from. He's our son." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know. It's just, this is bigger than us, Rachel. People are going to want answers." "I know," she said quietly. "But right now, all I want is to protect them." The next few days were chaotic. Specialists from around the world arrived at the hospital, eager to examine Leo. The medical team set up a controlled environment, ensuring that both babies remained safe and comfortable. Rachel and Ethan were consulted every step of the way, but it was clear that they were no longer in control of the situation. One of the specialists, Dr. Ramirez, was particularly fascinated by Leo. He explained that while the baby's anatomy was unlike anything on Earth, there were signs of compatibility with human biology. "It's possible," he said, "that this baby shares some genetic material with you, Mrs. Bennett. We'll need to run more tests to confirm." Rachel felt a mix of relief and confusion. "So you're saying he might be part human?" "It's a strong possibility," Dr. Ramirez said. "But where the other genetic material comes from, that's the real question." The implications were staggering. If Leo was indeed part human and part something else, it would raise questions that no one was prepared to answer. Rachel and Ethan tried to process the information, but the constant attention from the media and the medical team made it nearly impossible to think clearly. One evening, as the hospital quieted down, Rachel found herself alone with Leo. The room was dimly lit, and the hum of the monitors provided a soothing background noise. She rocked him gently, watching his large eyes blink slowly. "Who are you, little one?" she whispered, her voice soft and full of wonder. "Where did you come from?" Leo didn't respond, of course, but Rachel felt a strange sense of understanding pass between them. She had always believed that a mother's bond with her child was special, but this felt different. Deeper. It was as if Leo could sense her thoughts and emotions, responding with a calm energy that put her at ease. For the first time since his birth, Rachel allowed herself to hope. Maybe Leo's presence wasn't something to fear. Maybe it was something to embrace. The hope was short-lived. The next morning, representatives from a government agency arrived at the hospital. Dressed in dark suits and carrying briefcases, they introduced themselves as members of a specialized task force focused on unusual phenomena. Their presence sent a chill through the room. "We're here to ensure the safety of everyone involved," one of the agents said, his tone clipped and professional. "Including the child." Rachel bristled. "His name is Leo," she said firmly. "And he's safe with us." The agent didn't flinch. "Mrs. Bennett, this situation is unprecedented. We need to conduct our own investigations to determine the nature of this child and any potential risks he may pose." Ethan stepped forward, his voice rising. "He's not a risk. He's our son." The agent's expression didn't change. "That remains to be seen." Rachel felt a surge of protectiveness. She stood, cradling Leo in her arms, and faced the agent's head-on. "You're not taking him," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. The agent hesitated, clearly not expecting such defiance. "Mrs. Bennett, we're not here to take him, at least not yet. But we will need access to him for further evaluation." Rachel's grip on Leo tightened. "You'll have to go through me first." The tension in the room was palpable. The agents exchanged a glance, then nodded. "We'll be in touch," one of them said before they turned and left. As the door closed behind them, Rachel felt her knees go weak. Ethan rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her as she held Leo close. "We're not letting them take him," he said, his voice fierce. "No matter what." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We'll protect him," she said. "We have to." The days following the government agent's visit were a blur of fear and determination. Rachel and Ethan knew they couldn't let their guard down. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face in the hospital, felt like a potential threat. The media frenzy outside the hospital continued to grow, with reporters and cameramen vying for a glimpse of the mysterious family. Security was tightened, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before the agents returned. Inside their hospital room, Rachel and Ethan tried to focus on their babies. Noah was a typical newborn, crying loudly for feedings and naps, while Leo remained quiet and alert. His large, luminous eyes followed Rachel's movements with an eerie intensity, and she couldn't help but feel that he understood more than a baby his age should. Ethan sat by the window, rocking Noah in his arms. "We need to figure out what to do," he said, his voice low. "If they come back, we need a plan." Rachel nodded, her gaze fixed on Leo. "We can't let them take him," she said firmly. "But how do we protect him? They have resources, power. What do we have?" Ethan hesitated before replying. "We have each other," he said. "And we have the truth. He's our son, Rachel. They can't just take him away." That evening, Dr. Patel came to check on the family. She had been a steady presence throughout the ordeal, her calm demeanor a source of comfort for Rachel. As she examined Leo, her expression softened. "He's remarkable," she said quietly. "I've never seen anything like him. But he's also fragile. He'll need special care, Rachel, care that only you can give him." Rachel nodded, her heart aching at the thought of anyone trying to take Leo away. "What can we do to keep him safe?" she asked. Dr. Patel hesitated before answering. "You have legal rights as his parents," she said. "But this is uncharted territory. If the government decides he's a matter of national security, they could try to override those rights." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not happening," he said. "We'll fight them if we have to." Dr. Patel placed a reassuring hand on Rachel's shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "And you're not alone. There are people who will support you, who will stand with you to protect your family." Rachel swallowed hard, grateful for Dr. Patel's words but still overwhelmed by the enormity of their situation. "Thank you," she said softly. The next day, Rachel and Ethan made the difficult decision to leave the hospital. With Dr. Patel's help, they arranged for a private security team to escort them home, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy. As they stepped outside, the flash of cameras and the roar of reporters' questions surrounded them. Rachel clutched Leo tightly, shielding him from view, while Ethan carried Noah in his car seat. "Mrs. Bennett, is it true your baby is an alien? Mr. Bennett, how do you feel about raising an extraterrestrial child? What does this mean for humanity?" The questions were relentless, but Rachel and Ethan ignored them, focusing on getting their family into the waiting car. The drive home was tense, the windows of the vehicle tinted to block out the prying eyes of the media. Rachel stared out the window, her mind racing. When they finally arrived home, the quiet of their suburban neighborhood was a welcome relief. The house felt both familiar and foreign, a place that had once been a sanctuary but now carried the weight of their new reality. Rachel walked into the nursery, cradling Leo in her arms. She sat in the rocking chair, gazing at the room they had so lovingly prepared for their children. "I just want them to have a normal life," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Ethan knelt beside her, placing a hand on her knee. "We'll give them the best life we can," he said. "No matter what it takes." Over the next few days, Rachel and Ethan tried to settle into a routine. Caring for two newborns was challenging, but the stark differences between Noah and Leo made the experience even more surreal. While Noah cried loudly and demanded attention, Leo remained quiet and observant. He rarely fussed, his luminous eyes always watching, always aware. One afternoon, as Rachel was feeding Leo, she noticed something extraordinary. His skin, which had been pale and smooth, seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. It wasn't a trick of the light. His skin was emitting a soft, iridescent glow. Rachel gasped, her hand trembling as she touched his cheek. "Ethan," she called, her voice shaking. "Come here." Ethan hurried into the room, his eyes widening as he saw the glow. What is that?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Rachel said. "It just started." Ethan reached out to touch Leo's hand, his fingers brushing against the glowing skin. "It's warm," he said softly. "Almost alive." Rachel nodded, her heart pounding. "What does this mean?" Ethan didn't have an answer, but the moment solidified what they already knew. Leo was special. His presence in their lives was a mystery they might never fully understand, but one thing was clear: he was their son, and they would protect him at all costs. The glow wasn't the only strange thing about Leo. Over time, Rachel and Ethan began to notice other unusual behaviors. He seemed to respond to their emotions in ways that defied explanation, calming when Rachel was upset or radiating a sense of joy when Ethan laughed. It was as if he could sense their feelings and reflect them back, creating an unspoken bond that was both comforting and unsettling. Rachel couldn't help but wonder if Leo's abilities were connected to her dreams during the pregnancy. The glowing lights, the sense of weightlessness, everything felt too interconnected to be a coincidence. She decided to confide in Ethan, sharing the details of her dreams and the strange marks that had appeared on her skin months earlier. Ethan listened intently, his brow furrowed. Do you think those dreams were real?" he asked. Rachel hesitated before answering. "I don't know," she said, "but I can't shake the feeling that they're connected to Leo. Like maybe someone or something was trying to prepare me for this." Ethan nodded slowly. "If that's true, then Leo's not just special. He's important." Their conversations were cut short when the government agents returned, this time with a formal notice. They demanded access to Leo for further testing, citing concerns about his origins and potential risks to public safety. Rachel and Ethan refused, standing their ground despite the agents' veiled threats. The standoff escalated, and Rachel knew they couldn't keep this battle private for much longer. They needed help: legal, emotional, and community support. Dr. Patel stepped forward, offering to connect them with advocacy groups and lawyers who specialized in family rights and government overreach. "This isn't just about your family," Dr. Patel said. "It's about protecting Leo's right to exist and thrive without interference." Rachel nodded, her resolve hardening. "We'll fight for him," she said. "No matter what." As word of their struggle spread, public opinion began to shift. While some people still viewed Leo with suspicion, others rallied behind the Bennetts, offering their support and demanding that the government respect their families' rights. Social media exploded with hashtags like #ProtectLeo and #FamilyFirst, and protests erupted outside government buildings. Rachel and Ethan were overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. For the first time since Leo's birth, they felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't alone in this fight. But the battle was far from over. The government wasn't backing down, and the Bennetts knew they had to prepare for whatever came next. Rachel looked at Leo, his luminous eyes gazing up at her, and made a silent promise. "We'll keep you safe," she whispered, "no matter what it takes." The outpouring of public support was a beacon of hope for Rachel and Ethan, but it also came with its own challenges. Protesters, both supporters and detractors, gathered outside their home, turning their once quiet suburban street into a media circus. The government agents weren't backing down either. Their persistent demands for access to Leo grew louder, and the Bennetts knew they were running out of time. Dr. Patel worked tirelessly behind the scenes, connecting the family with some of the best legal minds in the country. Among them was Sarah Klein, a civil rights lawyer known for her tenacity and unwavering commitment to justice. When Sarah met the Bennetts for the first time, she made one thing clear: this isn't just a case about your family. This is about setting a precedent for how we treat the unknown. We're not just fighting for Leo, we're fighting for the future. Rachel and Ethan couldn't have been more grateful for Sarah's help. Her confidence and expertise gave them the strength to keep going, even as the pressure mounted. But the stress of the situation was taking its toll. Rachel barely slept, spending most nights sitting in the nursery, rocking Leo in her arms and humming softly to calm her racing thoughts. One night, as Rachel sat in the rocking chair, Leo's soft glow illuminated the room. His large, luminous eyes seemed to study her, as if he could sense her turmoil. She stroked his cheek gently, marveling at how peaceful he seemed despite the chaos surrounding them. "You're going to change the world," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I can feel it." As if in response, Leo reached up, his tiny hand brushing against her face. A sudden warmth spread through Rachel, a comforting energy that eased her anxiety and filled her with a sense of calm. It wasn't the first time Leo had done something like this, but it never failed to amaze her. Ethan entered the room, carrying a sleeping Noah in his arms. He smiled softly as he watched Rachel with Leo. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. Rachel nodded, her eyes never leaving Leo's. "I think he knows what's happening," she said. "I think he understands more than we realize." Ethan placed Noah in his crib and sat beside Rachel. "He's special," he said. "But no matter how different he is, he's still our son. That's all that matters." Rachel leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, grateful for his unwavering support. Together, they watched their son sleep, finding solace in the quiet moments amid the storm. As the legal battle with the government intensified, Sarah worked to build a case that would protect Leo's rights. She argued that he was a sentient being deserving of the same protections as any human child and that separating him from his family would be a violation of those rights. The case garnered national attention, sparking heated debates about ethics, science, and the unknown. Rachel and Ethan were thrust into the spotlight, their every move scrutinized by the media. They gave carefully controlled interviews, sharing their love for both their sons and their determination to keep their family together. Rachel's heartfelt words struck a chord with many. "Leo may be different, but he's still my baby. He deserves love and protection, just like any other child." The interviews helped shift public opinion further in their favor. More people rallied behind the Bennetts, their voices amplifying the call to #ProtectLeo. The support was overwhelming, but it also made Rachel and Ethan painfully aware of the stakes. They weren't just fighting for their family, they were fighting for the future of how humanity approached the unknown. Amid the legal proceedings, strange events began to unfold. One evening, as the family sat in their living room, a sudden flicker of light filled the room. It was faint at first, like a spark, but it quickly grew into a glowing orb that hovered in the air. Rachel and Ethan stared in stunned silence, clutching their babies tightly. "What is that?" Ethan whispered, his voice tinged with both fear and awe. The orb pulsed gently, its light shifting in color from soft blue to warm gold. It emitted a low, soothing hum that seemed to resonate in the very walls of the house. Leo, cradled in Rachel's arms, reached out toward the orb, his luminous eyes reflecting its glow. Rachel held her breath as the orb moved closer, its light bathing Leo in a warm radiance. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the orb vanished, leaving the room in darkness. "What just happened?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. Rachel looked down at Leo, who was now gazing up at her with a calm, almost knowing expression. "I think it was for him," she said softly. "Like a message." Ethan frowned. "A message from who?" Rachel shook her head, unable to answer. But deep down, she felt certain that whatever had just occurred was connected to Leo's origins. It was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder that their son's presence in their lives was far from ordinary. The following morning, Rachel and Ethan shared the experience with Dr. Patel and Sarah. While Sarah focused on how the event might impact their case, Dr. Patel seemed more intrigued by the scientific implications. If that orb was some form of communication, it could mean that Leo's origins are more complex than we thought, Dr. Patel said. It's possible that whoever or whatever he's connected to is trying to reach out. Rachel's stomach churned at the thought. "What if they try to take him back?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We don't know that. But whatever happens, you're not alone in this. We'll face it together." The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tension was palpable. The courtroom was packed with reporters, advocates, and onlookers, all eager to witness what was being hailed as a landmark case. Rachel and Ethan sat at the front, their hands tightly clasped, with Leo and Noah safely in the care of Dr. Patel nearby. Sarah stood to deliver her opening statement, her voice steady and powerful. She spoke of love, family, and the importance of protecting the most vulnerable among us, regardless of their origins. She highlighted Leo's humanity, the way he responded to his parents, the bond he shared with his brother, and argued that taking him away would be a gross injustice. The government's lawyers countered with arguments about national security and the unknown risks Leo might pose. They painted him as an enigma, a potential threat that needed to be studied and contained. Rachel's heart ached as she listened, anger bubbling beneath her fear. When it was Rachel's turn to testify, she spoke from the heart. "Leo is my son," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "He may be different, but that doesn't make him any less deserving of love and protection. He belongs with his family, not in a lab or under a microscope. We're not afraid of him, we love him." Her words brought tears to many in the courtroom, including Ethan, who held her hand tightly. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable as Rachel poured out her soul. The hearing stretched on for hours, each side presenting evidence and calling witnesses. By the time it was over, Rachel and Ethan were emotionally drained. They returned home to their babies, holding them close as they awaited the judge's decision. A week later, the ruling came down. The court sided with the Bennetts. Leo would remain with his family, protected under the same rights as any other child. The courtroom erupted in applause, and Rachel felt tears streaming down her face as she hugged Ethan tightly. "We did it," she whispered. "We kept him safe." Ethan nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "He's home." As the media frenzy began to fade, Rachel and Ethan focused on building a life for their family. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Leo's origins would always be a part of their story, but they were determined to give both their sons a loving, supportive home. One evening, as Rachel rocked Leo to sleep, she gazed into his luminous eyes and smiled. "You're going to do great things," she whispered. "I don't know what, but I know it'll be extraordinary." Leo blinked slowly, his glowing skin reflecting the soft light of the nursery. And in that moment, Rachel felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey was just beginning, but she knew one thing for certain: they were a family, bound not by appearances or origins, but by love. With the court battle behind them, Rachel and Ethan finally felt a sense of relief. For the first time since Leo's birth, they could focus on being parents without the looming threat of losing their child. But they also knew that their journey was far from over. Leo's existence was a mystery that would continue to draw attention, questions, and challenges. The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of joy. Rachel and Ethan settled into a routine, dividing their time between caring for Noah and Leo and adjusting to life as a family of four. Their home, once a target for media and government scrutiny, began to feel like a sanctuary again. The protesters outside eventually dispersed, and the constant calls from reporters dwindled. It seemed as though the world was finally giving them the space they needed to heal and grow. But even in this newfound peace, there were moments of wonder and discovery that reminded them of how unique their situation truly was. One afternoon, as Rachel played with Leo in the living room, she noticed something remarkable. He was sitting on a blanket, his luminous eyes fixed on a toy just out of his reach. Rachel watched as he extended his tiny hand, his expression one of intense concentration. To her amazement, the toy began to move, slowly at first, then with more certainty, sliding across the floor until it reached his fingertips. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan," she called, her voice trembling with both excitement and disbelief. Ethan rushed into the room, stopping in his tracks when he saw what had happened. Did he just move that?" Rachel nodded, her eyes wide. "I think so." Ethan knelt beside Leo, who now held the toy in his hands, inspecting it with quiet curiosity. "How is that even possible?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Rachel shook her head. "I don't know. But it's like he has abilities we don't understand." Ethan reached out to gently touch Leo's shoulder, his expression softening. "He's amazing," he said. "But we have to be careful. If anyone finds out about this..." Rachel nodded, her protective instincts kicking in. "No one can know." "Not yet." As the months went by, Leo continued to surprise his parents with his abilities. He could sense their emotions with uncanny accuracy, calming Noah's cries with a mere touch or filling the room with a sense of peace when tensions ran high. His glow, once faint and sporadic, became more consistent, a soft iridescence that seemed to reflect his mood. Despite these differences, Leo was also a baby in many ways. He giggled when Ethan made funny faces, clung to Rachel during feedings, and played happily with Noah, who adored his brother without question. The bond between the twins was unshakable, a testament to the power of love over appearances. Rachel often marveled at how seamlessly Leo had become a part of their family. To her, he wasn't an enigma or a mystery to solve, he was simply her son. And while the world might see him as something extraordinary, to Rachel and Ethan, he was just Leo. One evening, as the family gathered in the backyard to watch the sunset, Rachel felt a deep sense of gratitude. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, the warm glow casting a serene light over their home. Noah played on a blanket spread out on the grass, babbling happily as he reached for a stuffed animal. Leo sat beside him, his glowing skin blending with the fading sunlight. Ethan wrapped an arm around Rachel's shoulders, pulling her close. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said softly. Rachel smiled, resting her head against his chest. "We have," she said. "And I wouldn't change a thing." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on their sons. "Do you think the world will ever really accept him?" Rachel was quiet for a moment before answering. "I think it'll take time," she said. "But I also think Leo will show them who he is. And when he does, they won't be able to ignore how special he is." Ethan smiled, his eyes glistening with emotion. "He's going to change the world, isn't he?" Rachel looked at Leo, who was now reaching for the stars above, his tiny hands grasping at the sky. "He already has," she said. As the years passed, the Bennetts learned to navigate their new reality. They kept Leo's abilities a closely guarded secret, sharing them only with trusted friends like Dr. Patel and Sarah. They worked tirelessly to give both Noah and Leo a childhood filled with love, laughter, and the freedom to be themselves. Leo's uniqueness became both a blessing and a challenge. While his glow and abilities set him apart, they also brought moments of fear and uncertainty. But through it all, Rachel and Ethan stood by him, reminding him that he was loved unconditionally. One day, when Leo was old enough to understand, Rachel sat him down and told him the story of his birth. She spoke of the fear, the challenges, and the overwhelming love that had brought their family together. Leo listened intently, his luminous eyes fixed on her as she spoke. Do you know what makes you special, Leo? Rachel asked, her voice soft. Leo tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. Because I'm different? He asked. Rachel smiled, placing a hand on his cheek. No, she said. What makes you special is how much you're loved. And how much love you bring into the world. Leo's glow brightened, a radiant reflection of the bond they shared. I love you, Mom, he said, his voice filled with warmth. Rachel pulled him into a hug, her heart full. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything. As the family watched their sons grow, they knew that their journey was far from over. Leo's presence in their lives was a constant reminder of the extraordinary, a spark of light in a world that often feared the unknown. But to Rachel and Ethan, he was more than a mystery or a miracle. He was their son, and that was all that mattered. Their story wasn't just about survival or acceptance. It was about love, resilience, and the power of family. And as they faced the future together, they knew one thing for certain. They were stronger because of it.